Okay, so now that we have QUBES installed and we booted into it and we logged in this lecture, I want to give you a very basic overview of the operating system, and then we'll get to use it more and more as we go through the course. So as soon as you log in, you will probably see this window right here, which is a configuration window for the Whonix gateway. This is the gateway that will direct all the data that we send to the internet and force it to go through the Tor network. Now, before configuring this, I want to give you an overview of the operating system, like I said. So I'm going to keep this to the side because I want to connect to the internet first before we configure this. The first impression, you'll probably notice that this looks very similar to a lot of Linux operating systems. You have a status bar in here that shows the running applications. And on the left here, you have a menu which allows you to run various applications in this operating system. You'll notice we can run a terminal in here, which is very similar to Linux terminals, like I said, and runs a lot of Linux commands, plus some QUBES specific commands. Other than this, you will also notice that we have System Tools menu, which allows you to access different applications related to the operating system. The one that you'll be using the most is the Settings Manager. Again, this is very similar to the settings application you get on a lot of Linux distros, and it allows you to change the various settings of the operating system. You can change the appearance, the desktop, the background, the windows, the mouse and keyboard, the languages, and so on. I've actually used this to modify the font size and the icons and even the theme here on top. So you'll notice the theme that I have right now is slightly different than what you see on your desktop if you just install QUBES. The reason why I did this is just to make it a little bit more readable and easy for you to see what I'm doing if you're watching this from a small screen or from a phone. So, very simple settings. You can click on whatever setting you want to modify, and then you can modify the different settings just like any other operating system. So it's very, very intuitive, and there is no point of wasting time on this. Again, in the System Tools, other than the Settings Manager, you will find various settings and various applications that you can use to configure your system. So you have the Package Manager, where you can install different programs in different packages. You have the Updater, where you can check for updates and update the system. You'll have your QUBES Manager, and we'll talk about that in details later on. You'll have the global settings for the operating system. Again, we'll talk about that later on. You have your backups, you have your updates, again, screensaver, and so on. So you can spend some time with this, trying to familiarize yourself with it, or just keep this in mind that you have the System Tools in here in case you wanted to modify any settings related to your system. Other than this, everything else you see in this menu will allow you to launch applications, and all of these applications are categorized or grouped based on different security domains and different virtual machines. And we'll talk about that in more details later on. Now, moving on to the right on the status bar, you will see that we have 4 different boxes. Each box of these is a desktop. So again, this is similar to a lot of Linux distros and even OS X. So you can have multiple workspaces where you can launch different applications and manage your windows, and you can easily navigate through them using this status bar in here by simply clicking on the workspace you want to go to, or using the Control-Alt right or left, so Control, Alt, and arrow to navigate between them. So for example, we already have this window open in here, and if I go to the second workspace in here, I can open my terminal, and I can easily navigate between them in here by simply clicking at the workspace, or by doing Control Alt left to go back to the first workspace, or Control Alt right to go back to where I have the terminal open at my second workspace. Moving on to the right, again, we have our time and date, a calendar. We have the audio settings. Beside that, we have the network settings. So if we click on this, you can see, first of all, we have the Ethernet network, which is saying disconnected. This is because I don't have a wire connected to the computer. If you want to connect to an Ethernet network, just plug the Ethernet cable into your computer and you should be able to see the network in here. And all you have to do is literally click on the network and connect to it. Alternatively, if you want to connect over Wi-Fi, again, for me, you can see it's saying disconnected, but it's listing all the Wi-Fi networks around me. Now, if you have a wireless card in your computer, but you're not seeing any networks, that means that you need to install the drivers for your card. And this really depends on the chipset used in the card. So you'll have to go and Google and research the chipset used and see if it's compatible with QUBES. If it is, you'll have to see how to install the drivers. In my case, I was lucky. QUBES is able to detect my Wi-Fi card automatically without having to install anything. So all I have to do is literally click on the network that I want to connect to, put the Wi-Fi password, and perfect. As you can see, the icon in here changed to an icon that is showing me the signal strength, and it's also saying the name of the network that I connected to. And if I click on it, we can see that we are connected to this network, and we can click here to disconnect. So right now I should have internet connection on this computer, but I'm not going to open any websites. We'll talk about that later on. So we're just going to move on, just talking about the basics of QUBES. And the next icon that we have in here is the clipboard icon. And this is basically where you'll see whatever you have copied, because copy and pasting in this operating system is slightly different than what you're used to in other operating systems, again, to improve the security of the system. Next, we have the device manager. So in here, you have all of the devices connected to this computer right now. And using this menu, you can select where do you want to connect each of these devices. So as we mentioned, QUBES is designed to improve the security by separating and isolating the different components of the system. Therefore, when you connect a USB device or any type of a device, you'll have to explicitly say which domain you want to connect this device to. Now, I know this sounds a little bit vague right now, but we'll use it in the future, and you'll see how you can connect different devices to specific security domains, and you'll understand how this actually improves our security. Next, we have the storage manager, and you can see the storage devices connected to this computer. Right now, we can also see the disk usage of our system. Next, we have the QUBES manager, which is something that we will spend a lot of time talking about, again, later on. Basically, what it does is it shows you the amount of resources each cube or each virtual machine is using at the moment. And by hovering over any of these virtual machines, we'll be able to enter its settings, we'll be able to pause it, shut it down, or run a terminal inside the virtual machine. If you just go down to the last option in here, Open QUBES Manager, you'll get the Cube Virtual Machine Manager, which allows us to modify various settings of all the installed virtual machines and see their status, update them, and all of that. And like I said, we will spend a full lecture talking about this, so don't worry about it for now. Just wanted to show you where it is and how to enter the Cube Manager. Finally, we have the update icon in here. You'll only see this if there are updates available. Again, you can click on it and launch the updater to update your installation. We have the power settings beside it. And finally, we have our user, which is in my case, John. Clicking on this will allow you to lock the screen, suspend, shut down, or log out. So as you can see, very simple and intuitive interface. You're probably able to figure out most of the things that I was speaking about earlier by yourself, but I just wanted to make sure that I cover everything in here before we dive deeper into this operating system. And I also wanted to cover how all of these are virtual machines in here so that you get an idea of what's coming in the next lectures. Now, I'm going to go back to the window that I said you'll see as soon as you log into the computer. So like I said, this Windows is related to the Unix gateway. This is the gateway that will force all traffic to go through the Tor network. So this is something that we actually do want to configure. And you can see the options in here are very similar to the options that we see when we first launched the Tor browser. So we can leave it at connect to just connect simply to the Tor network. We can click configure if you want to use a bridge, or a pluggable transport. Now, if you don't remember what bridges and pluggable transports are, please go back and revise the lectures where I covered them, because I covered them in details and I covered multiple ways on how to get bridges and pluggable transports and why you might want to use them. Therefore, I'm just going to keep this at connect at the basic setting, and I'm going to click on next. And this is just showing us a summary that we're going to be connecting to the Tor network. The bridges are disabled and we're not using any proxies, so that's fine. We're going to click on next. And perfect. As you can see right now, it's telling us that we are connected to the Tor network. Now, keep in mind, please don't go and start browsing straight away. Not all web browsers in this operating system will forward traffic through the Tor network. So don't just go and access dark web websites right now. Wait for the next lectures, and I will explain to you the different web browsers and the different gateways inside this cool operating system. Now that we had a basic overview on QUBES as an operating system, in this lecture, we're going to dive deeper. We're going to learn about the structure of the operating system and how to launch different applications and use them in a secure manner. So in the previous lecture, I said we can access all the applications from the top left menu in here. And other than the tools, like I said, each entry in here is actually a virtual machine, and then each one of these virtual machines contain different applications that you might want to use. Now, like we said before, basically a virtual machine is another completely separate operating system that runs within our current operating system, within this computer right here. So each one of these entries in here is another operating system, and hence the name virtual machine. It is as if it's a completely different computer. It has its own storage, it has its own RAM, its own CPU, its own resources, and therefore this implementation is very, very secure because none of these virtual machines can communicate with each other. So if one of them gets hacked, or an application that is stored in one of these virtual machines gets hacked, it will not be able to compromise the other virtual machines. Now you'll notice there are different types of virtual machines in here. We have disposable virtual machines, domain, service, and template. The disposable virtual machines are amnesic virtual machines. So these machines are designed to be used to run untrusted files, or files that you think might be malware or viruses, because once you run these files in them, even if these machines get hacked, the virus or the backdoor cannot move, or the hacker cannot move and compromise other machines, because like we said, everything is a completely separate machine. Not only that, once you turn off this disposable machine, everything that was stored on it, including the virus or the backdoor, will be removed. So when you start it again, it will start a completely brand new machine. Next, we have the domain virtual machines, and you can see these have different colors. And the idea of these machines are normal computers or normal virtual machines that can be used for normal usage. So you have one that's called personal. You should use this for whatever personal use you use a computer for listening to music, watching YouTube, watching my videos, whatever you usually do on a personal computer. You have an untrusted domain. This is a virtual machine that is designed for you to do untrusted things. For example, doing the normal web browsing. If you are searching for something and you're not sure if you're gonna land in an untrusted website, then you can use this untrusted machine. Don't open your email or any accounts on this because it's untrusted. You're gonna be doing untrusted tasks and opening untrusted websites. Therefore, even if this machine gets hacked, your personal data on your personal computer will not be compromised because they are two completely separate virtual machines. We have a vault domain, and this domain is a virtual machine that is not connected to the internet. And the whole idea of this is you store your most important and most secretive files or data. So you can store your secret keys, you can store your passwords, you can store documents that are very important and you can't risk them being leaked. And again, the whole idea is this is not even connected to the internet, and it's a completely separate computer, completely separate virtual machine. Therefore, it is very, very, very difficult or next to impossible to hack into. Finally, we have a work domain. Again, this is just another virtual machine that is designed for you to use for your work tasks. So you can open your work email, you can log into your work if your work needs you to log into a certain platform. And again, this is a completely separate virtual machine. So if any of the other machines get compromised, your work, whatever you have in this virtual machine, will not be compromised because it is a completely separate virtual machine, a completely separate computer. Now, this whole idea of separation between domains and between virtual machines is what QUBES is made of, is what QUBES is designed to do. And even if you think this is a little bit vague, don't worry about it. I'm going to give you examples in the next lecture where I'm going to have different virtual machines, and the whole idea will become very, very clear. Other than the domain virtual machines, we have a number of service virtual machines. Now, these are virtual machines designed to carry out system services. So even though these are virtual machines, you don't usually use them to carry out different tasks. So we don't use them to access the internet, or we don't use them to store files. The idea of these virtual machines is to provide services for the operating system. For example, the sys firewall right here is literally the operating system firewall, but to improve the security of the operating system, the whole firewall is stored in a completely separate virtual machine. Same goes for the sysnet. Sysnet is basically a virtual machine that is designed to encapsulate your networking, the networking of this computer. So if for any reason, if someone manages to exploit your networking, it will be very difficult for them to escalate their privileges and gain access to the other virtual machines. We also have another networking virtual machine, which is the sysHUNEX. This is the HUNEX gateway, which basically forces all traffic to go through the Tor network. And we'll see how we can configure virtual machines to use this gateway. And basically, we'll have an operating system very similar to Tails. And finally, we have a number of template virtual machines. These are machines that the other virtual machines, such as the domain virtual machines right here, are based off. So, for example, the work virtual machine and the personal virtual machine are both templates of the Fedora 30 virtual machine. So if you update the Fedora 30 virtual machine right here or install Pigeon on it, automatically personal and work, because they are based on this template on the Fedora, they will automatically get updated and they will automatically get Pigeon. And we'll talk about that in more details later on. Now, I know I spoke about a lot of different types of virtual machines and domains. Don't get confused and don't worry, we will be using them a lot in the next lectures, and as we use them, the difference will become clearer and you'll find it very, very easy to understand. The main idea to keep in mind is the only virtual machines that you will actually be using for your day-to-day use are the domain virtual machines, the ones that colored in here, and start with the word domain. Everything else is either a service virtual machine, so it's running a system service, or a template virtual machine, so it's a virtual machine which the domains are based off.